You guys are tuned in to CRE8 Force, where we create and dominate. With me, I have a special guest. Our guest is what you call a game changer. Her writings and her work with the Women's Initiative team prompted the DoD to design its first ever maternity flight suit and changed the way the Air Force designs aircraft from human systems and integration. She challenged policies and barriers preventing our members from contributing at their peak. So I would like to welcome Jessica Ruttenber. Jessica, how are you?
I am wonderful. So enjoying the snow here in New Jersey, South New Jersey.
Awesome. Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm really excited to talk with you today. For anyone that doesn't know you, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what led you on this journey that you're on?
Absolutely. I joined the Air Force before 9/11, so I'm going to go ahead and date myself right there. And I wanted to be a pilot. And I couldn't be a pilot because of my height. And I didn't know at the time it was because they based it on a male standard of height, of the average male, plus or minus 2 deviations. And I was exactly the average height of a woman, which meant I was automatically eliminated for pilot training. But I didn't know that at the time. I just thought I was short. And it took me years to fight getting back into pilot training. And then I went on and had a great career. Did all of the Afghanistan, Iraq, all those tours back to back, flying from out of LUD to UAE to all these places. And then eventually I became a lieutenant colonel by some miracle. Didn't get fired. I didn't leave the service. And then stuff started happening to me, but more importantly, started happening to my airmen. And then I kind of woke up and saw what diversity meant to me. And I did not realize that women were only like 3% pilots when I came in. And then at the time, it was only 5%. Yeah, it was like 30 years after women had been, could be in combat. And we're still at these really low numbers. So why is that? And I started understanding because I lived it. And then as I started exploring and stopped getting so angry and started deciding to do something about it, especially in the Pentagon, having access that I did, I started getting smarter using data and how it impacted the mission to influence others. And as I dug, I started finding out it wasn't just female issues, it was Hispanic issues and Black issues. And God forbid you fall into more than one category, like you are a Black woman, or or you're a lesbian Black man, or not Black man, but a lesbian and you're Black, something like that. You have even larger hill to climb to have the same equal access to the beginning of the starting line.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important to mention, regardless of the career field that you're in, right? Like, everyone has a different challenge, and right. It is hard to it's hard to lead people if you don't know what they're facing on a regular basis, right? Can you even speak from like the officer perspective of what that looks like when you start to see those barriers? You know what I mean?
It's where I started seeing the change is that you are the example. So what you decide is okay for you, you have decided it is okay for everybody else. So if I'm a woman and I decide I don't want a breastfeeding, a lactation room, and I'm okay with my office, well, not everybody has an office. Sometimes they're in an open workspace. I remember I had a young captain, and she kind of did the same thing, and she said, hey, I'm okay, I have this little area here. And I said, well, that doesn't meet the standards for lactation spaces for the Air Force or the Department of Defense. She's like, I'm okay with that. And I said, hey, this is called leadership, and we have 200 people in this squadron. And when you decide to go into that closet, you said to every male supervisor and every female supervisor, if Captain so-and-so is okay with it, why should Senior Airman so-and-so ask for anything different?
That's really interesting. Now, like, as you say that, because I'm sure there are people out there that when they hear you being a leader and you advocating for change for particular issues and problems and barriers that are happening, there is a subgroup that feels like, well, that I feel like that's being too woke. I feel like we're kind of softening our military, or this is a distraction from the overall mission, regardless of what that mission is. But realistically, not addressing these issues can be just as damaging to our force. Can you speak to how restricting policies can be to members, and why we need to speak up about these barriers and how they can be a problem for national security as a whole?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the right way to go about it. What is our mission, and how does, addressing these issues contribute to the mission? And I'm going to say, I was the first one probably 10, 15 years ago. I may have been just as sexist as some of the people that I talk to now that I'm trying to educate. And I was like, no, I don't want to make it a women's issue, blah, blah, blah. They're just being too sensitive, so-and-so. And I first got frustrated because I wanted to fly pregnant, and people were trying to prevent me from applying for waivers and stuff. And I said, no, I'm not a feminist. I just want to do my job. And that's basically what I think myself and our fellow service members want to do. I just want to do my job. And as I started advocating within the walls of the Pentagon, I had to frame my arguments of why should you care? We treat diversity, equity, inclusion as something that is not as important, especially under financial constraints. We tend to drop that off first, but it should be utmost important, the first thing we look at, because our recruiting, and it ebbs and flows, but overall, our recruiting population is dwindling. And I don't have the numbers from that was released last year, but 2 years prior, Department of Defense released it saying 71% of the population isn't eligible to serve. So that means there's 29% that we have to compete for that talent. And guess what? It's not all white male.
Right.
They come from community colleges and went to night school and got GEDs, and maybe they went to the academy. But it's a more diverse base that we're recruiting from now. So we have to appeal to everybody if we want to have the most talent people, not just the minimally qualified. I mean, if you're going to be cranking on an engine or flying that jet, I would want the most qualified individual, not the person that had the minimum test scores. And that's kind of how I framed it. As far as women flying pregnant, I was like, you're in a pilot crisis. Here, there's 400 aviators a year that's pregnant. If they all just flew one trimester, you would get 20 pilots back like this, flying training missions and training other pilots. Boom. You know how many years that would have took you? You know how many bonuses you would have saved? And that was just a simple policy change. And it was just because we didn't want to look at the data because it was kind of scary. Ooh, flying pregnant. But when we looked at it, it was not any more dangerous than driving to work. Sometimes driving was more dangerous based on statistics we got from Department of Transportation of the likelihood of getting into a very serious accident. And there's very few aircraft that we found that had hazards such as noise, vibration, acceleration that would actually endanger the individual or the fetus. So really, it was fear-based policy, not really educated. We were being more overprotective and not really looking at data. And you could say that for the same thing as anthropometrics. Well, why would you design an aircraft before women could fly in combat? Makes perfectly sense to me when they say that. But the problem was they keep assuming that women are flying now for decades and decades, that the problem has been fixed. But nobody went and looked under the hood to find out they're still using a 1960s database. And by the way, that 1960s database didn't use anybody but Caucasian body types, and our body types are different. So you can be 5'6", and somebody else could be 5'6", and that person might fail their sitting height, even though they're above the minimum height of 5'4", because African American bodies have shorter sitting height than standing height, their leg heights. So when you sit in a cockpit and you have to look out, it's built around the average white man. So if you have a different ethnicity, you're more likely to get disqualified. And that ended up eliminating 74% of Black women and 72% of Hispanic women because of that. And then we went ahead and said, hey, how is this hurting us, right? Well, we had tons of aircrew positions that we couldn't get enough qualified candidates, like cryptolinguists that had to speak multiple languages, such as Chinese Mandarin. Well, they were getting eliminated because they weren't 5'4", because the average Asian American woman wasn't 5'4", and they were getting eliminated. Guess who speaks that more frequently or as their second language or the first language at home? Asian American women's. And we were eliminating them based on a pilot standard in the front of the plane, and all they're doing is sitting in the back. So why are we eliminating a 5'2" woman that can speak, Mandarin fluently And then instead, we ended up lowering the D-Lab scores, which is the language test they take to see how you have the aptitude to learn a foreign language. So maybe you don't know how to speak it, but you have the ability to learn the language. We ended up lowering the score because we couldn't get enough people that spoke that language. And then when we did that, we significantly had a higher washout rate, up to 70% the first year of washing out of language school. And all it was a barrier because about height that didn't even apply to them in the back. We just did a peanut butter spread. Hey, it's always been this way, so let's just keep it this way. And we had to actually peel it back and then argue that, and they changed the policy. And I believe within like 6 months after we got to the right policy change, they went ahead and went back there and measured it and dropped it a couple inches right there. Boom, fixed. And it was that simple.
Wow. See, those are the type of things that we need to hear more examples of, honestly, because when you mentioned going into the data, I know there's this fear around data that, oh, you can just get lost in the numbers, and if you're not careful with the numbers, which is true, if you're not careful what you do with the numbers, you can absolutely spin a narrative that is not true. But when you look at the data and you're using it correctly and you have a purpose for that data, to your point, you're able to look under the hood and go, wait, this is outdated. Like, why are we still going by this? Why are we negatively impacting people or possibly hurting ourselves and the mission?
Right.
Because we're just not willing to be open.
I say this, but I really think senior leaders wanted the answers. And they just weren't getting the right data because they weren't asking the right question. And I remember when I started looking under the hood, and I wasn't the first one. There's been many who have tried this. I was sitting in the back of a room with General Goldfein, who was the chief of staff at the time. And I'm not going to say who it was because I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus because it's an idea, right? Not a person. We're going after an idea. I keep hearing this thing about, height issues for women. That's why we're at like 5% female pilots. And they're like, I approve every waiver that comes across my desk. And this general was up and down. Well, I was like, first, that's not true. I could tell you 5 people right this year I know personally. So I took that, said, okay, I'm not going to talk because I barely have enough rank to like get coffee for the general in this room. Took that back, started making some phone calls to the bro network, like you went to college with this person or you went to this course with this person, started pulling data. And I was like, yeah, it's actually, first of all, it's 90% approval, so it's not 100%. But what's interesting is they only put it in front of that person's desk if they meet a certain constraint and they don't give them the other ones. And they kind of throw that out. So yeah, he's approving 100% of it because only 10 are getting to his desk out of like the 200 that are applied for. And we were able to find that. So if you are in PME and you're looking for a paper to write, or, whether it's enlisted or officer or civilian going to school, I found that data in someone's paper who was a major who was angry that she had to get a waiver. So she wrote her paper on it 12 years later, went to the anthropometrics lab, wrote that, and that gave me the thread I needed to find the engineers that were still working there to validate it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No.
So someone's going to read your paper. It might be one person like me, but it might be the right person.
Right. And honestly, a lot of times that's all it takes is the right. Me and Kai talk about this a lot, which is sometimes our initiatives or whatever things that we want to change or go after, most of the time those things aren't wrong or bad. Sometimes it's just about timing and who it gets in front of. You can absolutely believe in an initiative or like, hey, this barrier is toxic to our force. This needs to change. But sometimes you're not getting that pushback or not seeing a lack of support, not because it's not a great thing or it's not a good idea, but sometimes it just has to hit the right person that knows the right person. And so that's great to hear that you've been able to be in those spaces and to be able to just be effective, honestly. I want to pivot slightly, and I want to ask you a little question because we talk about I know I hear word on the street is that you created some patches.
I didn't create them. I just accelerated something that was already made.
Okay. Tell us about it.
It's called Fly Like a Girl, and I started that General Goldfein initiative, and it was just basically getting more female pilots together and air crew as well, because there are 10 air crew positions that are enlisted, anywhere from a linguist to a load master to in-flight refueling. And there's a very small single-digit percentage of us. So we got this fly in together, and we get to have our own conference, talk about issues that are about women. Like, we have a different type of tool to use the bathroom when you're in a ejection seat, and we have to talk about the pressure of the suction. Like, there are issues that we need to talk about that maybe you might not be comfortable with, and you might be the only woman in your unit. So these things are important. And they got together and they created this patch for the event called Fly Like a Girl. And if you're not sure with, throw like a girl or hit like a girl, it's something we say in childhood, usually childhood, I hope, to mean as an insult. So fly like a girl is taking our power back, saying, yeah, I fly like a girl, try to keep up, instead of you fly like a girl.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people didn't understand the patch at first. And the first one they made was like this, and it was by an artist. This is a sticker, so you have a little bit of glare. And it is, actually that was the wrong one. It was a blonde one. I have so many now. And it was an artist named Melanie, and she was a pilot, she still is, and you can go to her website. It's called Plain Old Art. And she does a lot of this stuff. She drew it up after talking to several women, and they sent it off to this organization to make it for them, and they all bought it, and it sold out. It was amazing. Wow. So while this was happening, I was learning about the challenges of minority women and minorities in general in air crew, and I was like, well, I thought I had it bad, and I was like, they're less than 1% of 1%. So I reached out to the artists, and I said, hey, I would like to produce your patches on a very mass scale, but I want them in like all the ethnicities we can do it, different skin tones, different eye color. And she was 100% all in, but when we did this, it was a fundraiser as far as everybody put their money in. She didn't have the money to front it. And she didn't think at the time anybody would buy it because we had like 3 black female pilots at any given time, right? Right? Or, this, like, who's going to buy this? I was like, that's not the point. I said, it's going to sell. And even if it doesn't, we still should buy it, make them. So if you draw them up, I will finance it. I took a small loan because I didn't want to use the Women's Initiative team's money, because we were making patches for our stuff for morale. And I convinced the organization that made it to produce it, and they were very, very reluctant, thinking they wouldn't sell. And I said, okay, I will buy this many just to make it profitable for you. And they're like, okay. And we sold out within hours. Like, it was like flying. I was like, you know what? There's a lot of people that want their daughters to see it. There's a lot of people that want, to hand these out in schools, right? And we had it in, I don't even call it Black, Caucasian, Asian anymore. I just call it different types of features, right? Somebody corrected me on that, and they said, just because you call it Hispanics look different colors and stuff, and that's what we do now. We call it like skin tone, eye color, eye shape, the 4 types of hair textures, and now we have them in just about everything except for redhead. They're coming out next month, and
awesome.
We have them. And I love these, and we don't make any money off of it. When we do, it's basically you buy one of these, we give one away to a school. We give it out to youth programs.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
I can't keep them on the shelf, so I'm constantly trying to reorder them. It's just one little thing we do. But it shows you that, there's a market for this stuff. And not only is it not for the mission, but it's also like profitable to be more inclusive of your population. Not that you should be doing it just to make money, but if you needed that incentive for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you let people know, like, if they were interested in grabbing a patch, where can they get a patch? Yeah,
we're redoing our webpage, but we're on Etsy now, called Women in the Military. You can go in there and get a Wonder Woman patch. You can get Fly Like a Girl patch. We got all the like women empowerment stuff on there. And it's just something the Women's Initiative team did as a like 501c3 as our private civilian, just like you are a private civilian even though you're in the service. And we just do this so that we can hand out free stuff to people in units. Like, here's a Wonder Woman patch, or here's a Fly Like a Girl patch.
Awesome.
My husband gives a couple of them away at his unit. They had one of those ruck marches for 5 miles with one of those I'm going to say it wrong, but you know when they have the gurney with the dummy on it?
Oh yeah.
And he only had like a couple women in the march. They were doing women, peace, and security, and he gave them the Wonder Woman patches, you know, at his commander's call. And I was like, that's cool.
Nice. No, that's awesome. No, thank you for sharing that with us. And for anyone watching, please like go support, go grab you. Don't just grab one, grab a couple
and
patches.
you can just email me at Jessica Ruttenber at Gmail. If you have a school that needs it, or Girl Scout or Boy Scout, it doesn't matter. Like I get requests all the time. I'll just be like, how many kids, and I'll mail them out to you.
Awesome. So I got one last question for you. So I need you to we're going to treat this like a throwback. All right. So imagine you first joining the military. You're talking to younger you, like bright-eyed, new in the force, right? If you could do it all over again and have a conversation with that version of Jessica, what would you say to her?
Oh my gosh, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I often refer to my younger self. I want to shake her sometime for how ignorant she was, but I didn't know better. When you know better, you do better, right?
Right.
I would probably say keep the passion, but tell it in a way. This is a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote. Say in a way that others will want to follow you, right? You can be passionate and angry, but you have to say why it's important, be able to articulate your points, and to be able to use data and examples to, back up what you're saying. Instead of I just got angry all the time, I was like, this is BS, you're not approving my airman's waiver. This is BS. And I'd get all mad, like I could do something about it. So you might not be able to fix it now, and you might not be able to fix the policy, but you never know the influence you're going to have on somebody. Somebody moved mountains to get me where I was, and probably didn't realize the things I would have done. And the smallest thing you could do for somebody, early in their career could set them on the trajectory to completely change the way we do some policies.
Right. No, you're spot on, and thank you for sharing that, because like honestly, not just women, just people in general, I think need that message. Like, hey, like there's nothing wrong with being passionate. There's nothing wrong with wanting to see change. Just understand there is a way that we can communicate that. That will encourage people and motivate them to go, oh, I want to be a part of that. Like I want to hop on that bandwagon. So no, thank you for sharing that, and thank you so much for taking the time to hop on with us and hop on I know Kai really wanted to be here, but thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime. And really, anybody wants these patches or stickers or whatever we have on the site, just reach out, and we'll be happy to mail them to you for free.